We wanted to know how we could support children with refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds to make smoother transitions into early childhood education and care settings and with the first year of school. So we conducted a scoping literature review, which I'm delighted to present to you today. My name is Dr. Eseta Tualaulelei from the University of Southern Queensland, and I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues Dr. Kerry Taylor-Leech, Professor Bev Flückiger, and our research assistant Michaela Waite, who are all from Griffith University. Our project was funded and supported by the Queensland Department of Education and Queensland's Creche and Kindergarten Association, or C&K. Moving to a new early years education and care service, or into the first year of school, is a major milestone for many families. But families with refugee and asylum seeker status can face a unique combination of challenges with these transitions. Refugees are people who have been displaced from their home country due to conflict, violence, or persecution. Asylum seekers are those who have entered a country to seek refugee status, but their claims are still being determined. Because more information is needed to support early years educators' professional understandings of these children and their families' needs, and to shape effective systemic responses, we wanted to understand what is known in the academic literature about children and families who are refugees or asylum seekers and their experiences with early years transitions. We decided to carry out a scoping literature review of peer-reviewed academic literature following a method published by Arksy and O'Malley in 2005. Scoping studies are a reconnaissance tool for mapping a body of literature, and they can be used to help determine focus and direction for a full literature review. The review focused on these research questions. Number one, what are the transition experiences of children and families with refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds? And two, what system and educator supports can assist families with refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds? For the most comprehensive results, we searched 5 academic databases using the keywords shown in this table. Our criteria for inclusion were that sources had to be published between 1 January 2000 and 31 August 2021. For sources that included educators or teachers, these had to be in service rather than pre-service. We only included peer-reviewed academic literature, and due to our own language capacities, we could only scope sources in English. This table also shows our exclusion criteria, which was basically any sources that were not primary or applied. Our search protocol resulted in 121 resources that were analysed, and following Arksy and O'Malley 2005, we present a descriptive analytical quantitative summary first, before moving on to a qualitative summary of our findings. So where were these 121 sources from? We found that most of the literature came from Europe, and about half of that was from Turkey, which actually hosts the largest number of refugees in the world. The bulk of the rest of our sources came from Australia and New Zealand and North America, with only 2% of the literature from Africa, 2% from Asia, and 1% from various global locations. The predominant methodological approaches used were qualitative, commonly case studies and ethnographies. Most of the studies were conducted in primary or elementary schools and in early childhood settings. It was great to find that many of the studies were centred on children as participants, and there were a good number of studies that involved teachers, caregivers, and families. The most common sample size was 10 or fewer participants, and most studies lasted 3 to 6 months. We also scoped the terminology that each source focused on, and as expected, a majority of the studies focused on the term refugee. There were much fewer studies that focused solely on asylum seekers. We also found that quite a few studies presented refugee issues alongside immigrant and migrant issues, which is a concern because refugees and asylum seekers, they have to move across borders to preserve their lives or freedoms, while some migrants and immigrants do not. Some studies also framed their work using the terms newcomer and newly arrived, and in Australia we saw the phrase being used culturally and linguistically diverse, or CALD. To summarise our qualitative analysis, let's turn now to children's experiences of transitions. There were commonly reported positive experiences, such as children who loved their teacher in school so much that they wanted to attend during weekends and holidays. There were children who communicated confidently, they valued their family language and culture, and they loved seeing their families involved in a central school. They learned social skills from the educational setting that they continued to use at home, and they also developed strong friendships, social connections, and they developed their educational aspirations. Several studies reported that these children learned actively and readily, participated in play, making it clear that early childhood settings and schools hold many benefits for children whose start in life may not have been optimal. However, the literature was also clear that transitioning can be a challenging time. Some children may not be ready to be apart from their parents. They might have limited or interrupted schooling experiences, meaning that they're unfamiliar with the host country's educational rules and norms. Some children spoke very little or quietly in class. They had communication barriers and therefore they had few cross-cultural friends. We read several accounts of children being physically excluded or singled out by educators or bullied by their peers. There were a few cases of children who had undiagnosed special needs, and many more where children displayed negative emotions such as distress, sadness, anger, fear, aggression, homesickness, and tiredness. Children also experienced ongoing trauma from the situations their families had left, and as we'll see, children's experiences are really closely linked to the experiences of their families. Upon arriving in a new country, many refugee and asylum seeker families relied on community networks for information and social connection, and they valued any support they could receive in finding information. Because their children may have had limited or interrupted schooling, families valued homework as an activity that could help them catch up. They also valued centres and schools that provided a safe environment for their child and that helped their child develop. Families with refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds were distinguished by their resilience, and many families held high aspirations for their children's education. In interacting with their children's teachers, they really did respect the teacher's role and knowledge. Of course, family experiences weren't all positive. Most families experienced language and communication barriers. In addition, some caregivers had ongoing mental health issues related to trauma and stress. They had concerns about care and education and some practical concerns that I'll come back to later. The educational system was usually new or difficult for families to understand, and early years services and schools often provided quite limited opportunities for families to be involved. They also held cultural concerns related to, for instance, food and toileting, and caregivers and parents faced a range of challenges interacting with teachers, some related to racism and discrimination. There was a whole range of practical concerns reported, which I won't read individually, but the academic literature is quite clear that to transition a child into an early years service or into a school presents far more challenges for these families than for others. So, how can educators support these families and children? Here, the literature makes many recommendations. Educators should try to create an environment of safety and inclusion where children can find comfort when needed. Educators should strive to show positive attitudes and communicate clearly with children and families. They should consider using interpreters and translators for language support when communicating with families, and they should also make an effort to understand children and family backgrounds. Encouraging family and community engagement is recommended, along with promoting cultural inclusion and respect across the centre or school. Because families with refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds face a variety of challenges, it's helpful if educators can connect them with other community supports. So a degree of flexibility is also required given the practical concerns that families face. In the classroom, teachers should try to promote children's interactions and inclusion. There's a lot of value to developing children's emotional skills and promoting their resilience. As well, they should develop intercultural skills, particularly addressing racism and discrimination. Children from refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds respond well to experiential and creative learning experiences, and educators should focus on developing children's language and communication skills so they can participate fully in centre or school life. Teachers should use differentiation, promote agency and engagement in learning, and have clear rules and expectations. They should also praise children's efforts. The literature also highlighted the need for educators to reflect and collaborate, particularly in response to teaching or family engagement dilemmas or challenges. School leaders can, of course, play a pivotal role in helping educators support children and families. At another level, there are several ways that educational systems can support the transitions for children with refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds. These relate to the collection of data, an inclusive curriculum, the targeted promotion of early childhood education and care engagement, and orientation programs for families. It also helps if enrolment and transition processes can be consistent, if support staff are employed, specialist support offered, and if some of the practical issues these families face can be supported, for example, through school lunch or transport programs. Another area that the literature is clear on is that educational systems should provide professional resources and support, particularly for aiding children's trauma recovery. We can offer several ideas for moving forward. To clarify the field, we think there's a need to clearly distinguish refugee and asylum seeker issues from migrant and immigrant issues. In addition, more research is needed about theoretical or conceptual approaches to early years transitions. Areas that need more exploration include research into educational system responses and more studies across localities or similar contexts. We also note that literature in English from South America and the Middle East is limited, although these are key sites of refugee and asylum seeker activity. I guess what we're asking is, what are we missing? For the future, we should continue with strengths-based qualitative research that's focused on children's and families' experiences and explore systemic responses that can offer sustained professional support for educators and teachers. We also think it's worth doing a systematic literature review with a narrower focus. For example, transitions for children into early childhood education and care, or focusing on transitions into primary or elementary school for children who have that early childhood education and care experience and for those who do not. To conclude, the positive transitions of children with refugee and asylum seeker status into early years education and care services and schools requires educators and educational systems that are supportive of and responsive to the unique combination of challenges faced by these families. The academic literature that we've provided a scoping review for provided guidance for supporting families with refugee and asylum seeker status, and it revealed several areas that require further exploration. Thank you so much for your kind attention.